Welcome back, everyone, to QiDao's Fireside Chats. I'm Kila. Missing Ben today. He's on a flight over to France for ECC. We have a special guest from UMA Protocol, Chandler. Welcome.
Hey, Kila. Great to be here.
Happy to have you. Usually we like to start these off with you telling everybody a little bit about yourself. Who is Chandler?
Yeah, great. So I joined the UMA protocol fairly recently, but come from a background of working for centralized crypto exchanges. I worked for a company called Luno, which targeted pretty much like the emerging market space. So think of Coinbase, but just emerging market space. And spent a bit of time growing there. In fact, it was my first gig for a while. And yeah, so I'm based in South Africa at the moment, and been working for the UMA protocol from the beginning of this year, and kind of just been enjoying most of the DeFi space recently.
Okay, what really sparked your interest in crypto or blockchain in general?
It happened a little while like into like when I was at university or college, when I'd basically started a mathematics degree that turned into a computer science degree, and realized I wouldn't be a very good dev because paying me for my skill would be terrible. And so I quickly pivoted to economics. And I mean, like, even if you're a terrible dev, you pick up quite a bit of like computer science and cryptographic stuff, and the maths behind cryptography was pretty intriguing to me. And then I, went into economics, and crypto is nothing more than just a combination of maths and economics in a probably the most elegant way. And so it was like then the most natural way for me to jump into the space, and kind of, yeah, been here ever since.
What was jumping into the space like? Because I know you just mentioned that you're in South Africa. I'm assuming that you went to university or college in South Africa as well. Was it
Correct.
difficult to hop into the space? Was it what was that like?
Yeah, it was probably the best gamble I ever did, because everyone told me at the time, bad space to be in. You're not going to have a job in 6 months. You're working for a Ponzi scheme. The idea of crypto was still extremely like new and not really well known. And so once I joined it, I joined at the time a very small startup. It was less than like 20 people. And I mean, it's the same kind of like discussion as if somebody were to start at a Kraken or a Binance when it was less than 20 people. And if you look at how those companies scaled, it's like getting into the space versus where it ended up was like 10x or 100x more than anyone ever imagined. So getting into the space was quite nerve-wracking in the beginning, but I mean, I'm young, I can take risks. I can be a bit like loose and wild. And I think the favorite part about it annoyed every single person that I knew. So for like a side tangential point, I come from a family of like bankers and central bankers, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like old school money, from like, old school financier guys. And there's me trying to be like the central bank of the future in a decentralized way. And it annoyed them, and I kind of took a little bit of pride in that.
Okay. Oh, I love that. So that made family dinners really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
The future.
Exactly. What advice would you give somebody who may be a little hesitant to get into the space, or they're a little worried? Like, do you have any nuggets of advice?
Yeah. Any new space that you jump into will have an enormous amount of noise. I mean, think of the .com generation when thousands of different companies were like popping up because there was this, a lot of hype around that. The same thing's actually happening in the DeFi and crypto space. We got a lot of noise cutting through the to like get your attention and attract talent and be the next big hotshot company that comes out of it. So the first one is like cut through that noise and realize that even if you choose and like you sink your teeth into one startup or another company and it ends up failing, it doesn't mean the industry is failing. It's just that that's the natural progression of an industry where bad ideas should die and the good ideas should succeed. And even if you do end up not being part of like a successful startup, that is by no stretch of the imagination like a reflection of the potential that the industry holds. The other bit of information that I would kind of suggest as like maybe a more positive forward-looking one is that like the industry is just starting.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know the size of the pie, right? We don't know what like use cases are going to happen. This is like a brand new industry that's starting out from scratch, and there is like so much of the pie that hasn't even been like created, let alone like taken market share. So we look at like, I don't know, some of the top DeFi players and the top crypto exchanges in the world, and we think, okay, cool, the industry is saturated. Let's not target that. That's probably not the right way to look at it. You should probably look at what they're not doing, because there's still an enormous amount of value that you can like create and and be part of if you just see what they're not doing and capitalize on that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Perfect. And so let's switch gears into UMA. You're with UMA protocol right now. Give the audience a little intro into what UMA is from two different perspectives. One, if you're talking to a DeFi guru, and then secondly, somebody who's just entering the space.
Cool. So from a DeFi guru space, is UMA really makes like the ability to transfer risk amongst users a lot easier to manage than like ever before. And what do I mean by risk, right? If you have a portfolio of a bunch of assets, you might want to have like downside protection. You might want to not be so keen on going to the moon. Instead, you just kind of want to protect your value that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas another person on the other side doesn't really care about if it goes to zero. He's just more interested in the idea of it going to the moon. And so these two traders are on either sides of a trade, where one wants to lever up on some risk and one wants to lever down. And that is how traditional financial markets work, right? And we make that possibility of creating financial primitives that allow for anyone in a decentralized way, without legal contracts or lawyers, go into legally binding trade and enforced trades with one another, where you are confident that the other person will hold up. And like, if you think about like traditional finance, if you and I, Kila, go into like a deal now where I'll say, all right, I'll let's take a standard like call option. I'll sell this to you in the future at a given price. If it's above the price, you make money. If it's below the price, it expires worthless.
Yeah.
The only way that you can enforce that with me in the traditional financial world is if we have like lawyers that can handle that. But in DeFi, we don't. We have smart contracts that do that. And so you basically have just written a legal financial contract where one counterparty is held to the terms of the deal without ever having a middleman involved. And so like we make that possibility using financial primitives really easy and simple for users to make use of.
Awesome. And now for the person just entering into the space.
Yeah, so UMA's not a novice-friendly protocol, specifically for the reason that it's not that it's hard to understand. It's just that the concepts of like financial engineering and financial legal contracts is somewhat of an advanced topic. But for an average person, if you kind of want to know what we do, like at UMA, is that we launch, we make synthetic assets easy to create.
Got you. Who is your ideal user at UMA?
Our ideal user changes depending on kind of the product type that we're creating
Mhm.
at any given point in time. So like what we spend a lot of time is looking at what the DeFi space is, and what are some of the tools that some of the DeFi space needs. And right now, I would classify that as a group of DAOs that have basically just like a 95% of the balance sheet that these DAOs have, all in their native token.
Yeah.
And if you think about like all the financial principles, that's like the worst idea. It's undiversified. You only have one risk profile. You can't like you're also restricted on just selling the tokens because that's a bad idea. So these DAOs want to be able to utilize that balance sheet. They want to be able to raise funding, and they want to be able to also earn a yield on it. Because I mean,
Mhm.
most of the time they send tokens out for other people to earn yield, but you should also earn yield on that asset yourself as a DAO, right? And then the other element is that you want to diversify that balance sheet so that you're not totally exposed to one particular token price movement. And so we're creating a bunch of products that allow DAOs to exchange tokens with investors, with community members, with other DAOs in neat ways. And we kind of have two mainstream products that work in that space.
Mhm.
One of them being our range bonds, which is we can kind of go into that maybe a little bit later. And the other one is a KPI option, which is a bit more community focused that allows DAOs to tie rewards with what the DAO wants to achieve.
Okay, let's dive into that one. Let's dive into the KPI options a little bit. So, what type of incentives or what type of KPIs do you usually see DAOs throwing out there?
So KPI, and just for anyone that isn't quite aware of what a KPI means in
Yeah.
the real world, it's just a key performance indicator, and it's a bit more of like a business speak term for just like what is the most important thing that this DAO measures itself by. And some DAOs, like an exchange, might think that total value traded, like how much liquidity gets traded on their protocol, that's a good measure of the health of that particular protocol. Another DAO, for example, might be like an Aave that needs to lock up a lot of collateral to be able to create a lending market.
Yeah.
So total value lock might be the metric that you want to use. Another DAO, let's say, for example, a DAO like UMA that's not very particularly worried about how much collateral we lock up, but more how many protocols use the UMA protocol, like how many developers are developing on us.
Yeah.
So we might worry about like the number of integrations or the number of users of these protocols, or sorry, of these products. And so choosing that metric really matters on what the DAOs really like interested in wanting to kind of measure. Once you have a measure of that, you can then create a reward scheme that locks up collateral, and this collateral is entitled to anyone that the DAO thinks has an ability to move the needle for them. So whether it be the community, partners, um, uh, anyone, like let's take an airdrop, for example, a community
Mhm.
airdrop. You want to distribute the tokens to the community. That kind of really is what DAOs are made up of as.
Yeah.
And so you distribute these tokens, and typically what happened before was that people just immediately sold them.
Mhm.
But now with this KPI option, they're locked behind this KPI. And so an important distinction that I should make is that these tokens will unlock in the future. And when they unlock in the future, they'll unlock more rewards if the DAO reaches that KPI at a higher level than it did if at lower level. And
Gotcha.
what you've done is you've given a person the incentive that the token that they hold will in future be worth more if they help the DAO reach its goals.
That's
And
beautiful.
so this KPI option ends up being quite a powerful alignment incentive for teams to be able to work together in ways that that's not as kind of perverse as just like airdrops and liquidity mining programs have been, where it's like people just dump the token, and once you've earned like your 200% APY, you dump your tokens in that pool and you jump to the next one.
Yeah. So you're really activating the community behind this goal.
Indeed.
Oh, I love that. You mentioned a couple other people that you can use these with. One was the community, how you can activate them. I know you had mentioned investors as well. How do projects go about using these KPI options in that same way with the investors?
So an investor typically wants like some version of upside potential in the project, right? That's why investors invest in it. They take all the risk of the downside with trading it off for the upside. What might be useful to understand for KPI options is that the delivery of who gets the tokens is really tied into who has the most impact of moving the needle for that particular metric that the DAO wants to target. And so if investors are that, then fine, investors can kind of be the ones that receive the tokens. Maybe it's business connections, maybe it's partnerships, whatever the investors are really good at. Where investors might find more uses in the idea of the range bond. And a range bond, just for very brief use cases, is a token that allows a DAO to raise funding, like let's say US dollar funding, to be able to pay developers bounties and kind of run the operations of the DAO without ever having to sell their token, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not allowed to sell the token according to their vesting schedules, right? But they still need to pay for developers, and most of the time, you don't want to sell the naked raw, the token in a raw naked way. You want to be able to sell it in such a way that allows you to protect against the downside, and so these range bonds work in that way. So from an investor's perspective, we kind of think that the range bond is a lot more useful than something like KPI options.
Okay. Got that. What makes for a bad KPI?
That's a great question, because I think almost all of the KPIs that come out have trade-offs, right? Because in one way you're incentivizing one direction that might trade off on another, or you might incentivize, and this is my favorite part about what the exploration through KPI options is most DAOs that I chat to will come to me and say, okay, TVL is their most valuable KPI. And you go through the process and you realize actually TVL is just a proxy for what is the underlying true value of what we're giving, right? Because we incentivize this, we either met the goal, we didn't meet the goal, but through that process, we learned what is actually our DAOs or our team or our project's most valuable MVP. And that exact experience happened with UMA, where we realized we wanted to do total value locked, because we realized that was what all the DeFi spaces metrics were. And upon reflection, once we had done our KPI based off TVL, we realized the TVL is a good proxy, and we still want to increase our TVL, but it's not the true value of what UMA gives out there into the world. And so the number of integrations, which if the more integrations you have, the more TVL you get, right? So we kind of went one layer below what that specific metric was. And so I don't think there is a bad metric ever. What I think is more valuable is that going through the idea of testing what is your most valuable metric, you end up finding a lower, a more truthful value of what you actually should be measuring as a team.
Got you. Okay. Once you figure that out and you push it out to the community, what have you seen, or have you seen the conversations within the community change?
I'll speak from the UMA community perspective, because that's the one I probably have the most thought on, and I was truly blown away by the amount of community engagement we got through this program. Right,
Mhm.
many of the community members realized they had aligned incentives with the UMA community team, and like upon their own just like level of like interest to grow their value through these options, that they wanted to do projects and bounties with the UMA team that we had never even thought of, nor either had capacity to kind of take on, and they just did it themselves. There was an aligned incentive in many ways that kind of pushed the boundary of what was possible. Like when I say possible, like what I thought was possible for like a community to kind of like galvanize themselves around like self-organization, people that were motivated to kind of like help the UMA team achieve its goals, and we then kind of pivoted ourselves to help this our community group, which we call the Super Umans, by the way. Um,
It's a cute
uh,
name.
yeah, and which we help them achieve their goals that they want to do. And so we got out of that experience a community that I'm just really proud to be a part of.
Okay, that's beautiful. I think we've definitely seen what you're talking about through one of your community members. It's also a QiDao community member. He's a chimp, poopster.
Yeah.
He came into the group chats
Shout
and
out
he
to
was,
you,
yeah, shout out to poopster. He came into our group chats and he was raving about what what those KPI options actually did for your community. So that I wasn't in your Discord, but if Poopster said, it completely changed the way the conversations were happening, I think that's fantastic. Um, so now we've discussed a little bit about what UMA does. How does UMA make money, or what's the business model for UMA?
So our focus very clearly, and like which won't change in the near future, is we really want to make sure that we build the infrastructure for developers to be able to create legal financial contracts on the
Mm,
blockchain or on Ethereum. And I say Ethereum now, but we're keen on scaling to multiple chains. Like we're on Polygon at the moment. We're going to scale to Arbitrum, Optimism, basically every EVM compatible chain. We really want to target within the course of the next 6 to 12 months, and past that, maybe even before that, one or two chains that aren't EVM compatible. But basically, UMA's infrastructure is decoupled in a way that we can scale everywhere, and we want to be that infrastructure layer where a person wants to launch a contract, they want to have it be secured, they want it to have it legally binding. Legally binding in DeFi just means like the smart contract enforces the terms in a way that it's tamper resistant, right? And so
exactly.
we want to be able to create that. And like DeFi in itself is nothing more than just the financial contracts that you build, right? You trust that the financial transaction that you have on Aave like upholds to its terms, because you don't trust Aave, you trust the contract that it
Mhm.
works on, right? And there's some brand reputation around that. But the real crux of like what UMA really wants to be is that infrastructure player. So our incentive is to get developers to build on us, developers to understand how to work with us, and for us to kind of reach out to where developers want to build on. I can see in the chat there's one question around, is UMA on Polygon? Question is, yes, we are on Polygon. We launched fairly recently on it, and you can create synthetic assets, risk transferring assets, launch our contract templates on there, and have it be secured by our Oracle service. If you want an article on how that works, I'll happily share that with you afterwards.
Okay, fantastic. And thank you for those questions. If you do have questions, feel free to throw them in there. We will be looking at them. Okay, great. So that's the business model. I think that's fantastic, because contracts are, contracts are what things in DeFi are built upon, and if you can help with that process and help make them more secure, I think all in all, it will give more confidence within the space to the users. Oh, cool. I guess let's dive into what are your thoughts? What excites you the most about the DeFi space at the moment?
Oh, geez, that I can spend the whole 30 minutes that we're meant to be together chatting about this one. But if I had to actually summarize it in short words, maybe, um, it's so new. Everything is kind of like being created for the first time, and I kind of want to characterize, and this is my own personal characterization. I want to characterize DeFi as a bunch of like smart people that came up with an idea that became billion-dollar ideas very quickly, and now they don't know what to do with it, right? And kind of, the big DeFi teams are like have obviously been like growing and building up the talent in that, but there is a lot of proof and kind of proving grounds that these teams need to go through to make sure they kind of like stand the test of time. And part of what I really want to start seeing DeFi, decentralized finance, take more ownership of, is handle the financial aspects a lot more, right? I think DeFi could do with a bit more like financial engineering and kind of financial primitives, a lot of incentivization games that like kind of need to come into play. I think the rewards structure at the moment is like kind of liquidity mining and yield farming. All of those have had the right intention, but I want to see them mature and grow into more organic type reward mechanisms that have basically just the intended outcome that they were meant to have. Because I think the intention is right, the incentive mechanism is wrong.
Gotcha.
And I want the DeFi space to learn really quickly on how to create the right incentive models. And then the next part, which like really excites me, is seeing those news articles when some really cool DeFi team that I'm pretty sure all of us on this call here would admire have like a link into the real world of like, because DeFi is still it's a microcosm of a microcosm. And then when they break out into like the traditional finance world and like do something cool from that, I want to see more of that happen. I want to see it break down. It's like, this somewhat siloed wall of what DeFi is as an insular community, not doing its own thing. I want it to actually hold up to its potential of like shaping what the financial future looks like.
Oh, I like that. How do you see, I mean, what do you see the future of DeFi in, say, South Africa?
Yeah. So the nice part about that question is that DeFi, what's the future of DeFi in South Africa is the same question as what's the DeFi around the world. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like it is like, that's the beauty of it. Like it transcends boundaries and it transcends like wherever you live. Like, Kila, you and I like chatted a little bit before this. We're pretty much on polar opposite ends of the world, and we can have this conversation. Same like situation applies for DeFi. What I would say to kind of be more specific to your question is the industry in South Africa is very like there's a lot of interest in crypto in South Africa specifically, whether it be trading Bitcoin, Ethereum on centralized exchanges, and plus all the other altcoins. But there is also this growing interest in DeFi as a participant. There are a few big name players in the DeFi space that actually came from South Africa. I wouldn't quite say it's like as popular as many of the other places, but in terms of like world ranking, I think South Africa is at least top 10, top 15 countries around the world with an interest in crypto and decentralized finance in general.
Gotcha. I think, even Elon Musk, which I don't know if he's really in DeFi, but also from South Africa. What scares you the most about DeFi?
Yeah, the hacks, man. Like, I think everyone DeFi has either been wrecked at least once, and if you haven't, then you're either really lucky or you haven't done enough. So I think it goes back to that question around like having having the right financial engineering implies that you must have the right financial incentives to kind of show your rewards and kind of how your products work is what I want to see going into the future. But if you look at like where we are now, that was the problem that we had 5 years ago, but on the engineering front, right? We didn't have like the right engineering tools to like look at bugs. We didn't have the security infrastructure in place to kind of like have like self-reported bugs before contracts get launched, nor did we have an audit process. And so like where we are now, and like so my fear is just the you know it's a bit more like backwards looking. But I mean, you still have a bunch of talent flowing in that hasn't learned some of the issues that have happened. And so I still see that even though, we've done a lot of work to improve the industry, we're going to have a couple more big high profile hacks on like tiny little bugs that have happened.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's move on to something maybe a little bit lighter. You moved over to Polygon. So how was that experience? And what does being on Polygon now like allow UMA and UMA users to do that may not have been available on, say, mainnet?
Yeah, so being on Polygon is an exciting space to be in. I think layer 2 in general has a lot of potential to really move the needle in just simply making like business use cases that were prohibitively like expensive on Ethereum, like now possible, right? And so I got a kind of like a trade-off, because like the less transactions that you have to do, the more efficient your processes become. And when you have like an outlet like Polygon where you can experiment and kind of be a bit more creative and throw tens of transactions at a single like process, you get more creativity but less efficiency, right? So I see being on Polygon as a way for developers to experiment using UMA's contracts and our financial templates, to really like create something new, try out new business use cases. I think Ethereum was quite stifling for any new developer to actually like confidently want to launch their product. And so being on Polygon Optimism and like the rest of our scaling roadmap, it allowed developers to push boundaries that we didn't think was possible, but also become more efficient, more creative at figuring out ways that people want to be able to kind of trade tokens, maybe trade them in more structured ways or less structured ways. And so being on Polygon basically allows that, because even right now, even though gas prices are a fraction of what they were a couple of months ago, it's still expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to send, I wanted to send you like $5. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense on Ethereum. Yeah. Okay. What are your thoughts on what is the future of these scaling solutions look like in your mind?
It's in the word, right? Decentralized finance. It'll be decentralized. It'll be fragmented. It'll be chaotic. It'll be maybe even just a little bit like unstructured for the near, I'd probably guess 2 years. I don't see the industry growing in a way that it makes one particular solution like be king of them all. I think being on Polygon, being the market leader as is, there'll still always be a market leader going forward, but that's kind of, Polygon alleviated the stress of Ethereum, but when Ethereum changes, there might be other blockchains that have an advantage because they have something else that developers are looking for. And kind of there will be this competitive element where these scaling solutions will come up with useful and innovative use cases that developers would want to use, and that will actually push the industry in a much more forward, like it'll be a forward-moving energy because competition is naturally good for consumers, it's naturally good for innovation, and it'll naturally allow way more experimentation on kind of what it is that like reaching consensus in a decentralized way would mean. And so I see that like there is still a lot of innovation to happen, which I'm really excited about.
Okay, yeah, it excites me as well. I mean, it's a beautiful space to be in, and there's just so much left to do. Um, have you been able to take a look at QiDao and what we've got going on?
Yeah. So I kind of have, and you like, let's not spoil it too much for all the users, but you and I have been chatting around like how we can kind of work together between Uma and QiDao. And so I see what like you guys are doing in the Polygon space, and like the only thing that I would add to like what what makes me excited is that like everything that you guys are trying to do with your protocol is kind of aligned with what I want to do with Uma, and that's just like support teams and developers like doing what it is they're wanting to do. So yeah, I'm keen to work with you guys. It's been fun so far.
Same. What do you think the role of stablecoins are in DeFi?
Yeah. So stablecoins solved the problem of volatility in crypto when markets were somewhat illiquid and there wasn't as much capital in them. And they were always the problem was that you always wanted to denominate your crypto in dollars or pounds or whatever. Let's just use dollars because they're all stablecoins are dollar pegged. And so the problem of having that stable source of value was always terrible when you had to like sell it for like real dollars at a centralized exchange. So alleviating the need to like actually have dollars in a bank account, instead you can have a representation of dollars like in a MetaMask wallet, was like hugely valuable for any DeFi native person to want to be able to take a speculative guess or like go long or short on a particular asset, and like if dollars was their base value and you sold a token, you were going short the value of the token basically and going long on the dollar relative to that. And so it made it actually was the thing that powered Uniswap, and it was the thing that powered many of the exchanges out there. So having some version of a dollar, or when we say stable, like stable in fiat terms, value term, is I think a powerful tool for anyone that wants to be able to still maintain a portfolio in dollars. I personally don't have a portfolio in dollars. I count it in ETH. But have that portfolio in dollars, and it'll make any newbie jumping in the space a lot more comfortable with understanding, like, when prices go up, this is what happens. When prices go down, this is what happens relative to dollars.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. I know we're running a little bit over time. I don't want to take too much of your time here. Few more questions. One is, do you have an ask for the Polygon community?
Yeah. If anyone in the Polygon community has an idea for creating synthetic assets, and a synthetic asset is just a way of like transferring risk over time, forward rate agreements, call options, swaps, whatever financial primitive that you want to use. If you have an idea around that, I'd firstly want to hear it, but mainly like my question would be generally, what is that? Like, what do you think the Polygon community would want to do between like someone that wants to speculate on like increasing their risk because they think something's, there's potential in there, versus a team that wants to, or a person that wants to like manage downside protection? What would, like, those two trade-offs, like that's both ends of the trade. What do you think would be a cool dynamic between teams and people and DAOs?
Perfect. Should they hit you up on Twitter or go to the UMA Discord, or?
Hit me up on Twitter and I'll gladly point you in the direction for where we can have a more one-on-one conversation. Hitting me up on Twitter might get you to go to our Discord as well. So it's the UMA Project Discord. We're also UMA Protocol on Twitter in itself, and those would probably be the most useful ways to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the community about yourself, UMA, anything?
Yeah. So UMA is really excited to announce that we had a developer mining program which paid out rewards to developers for developing on UMA. We have recently upgraded the system to be more in line with traditional grants programs. And so if you are a team that is developing on Polygon that wants to take advantage of our grants program, and kind of a few ideas sparked up in the specific conversation, reach out to me. I'd be very interested in chatting to you about your idea, and there might be even a potential of having a grant to kind of help support the development team around that.
Awesome. I love that. Y'all are all about community.
Yeah. Community is everything in DeFi.
It really is. It really is. It's I think the thing is that most people in other industries don't like they're always wowed when they see the amount of activations that the community actually has in these DeFi spaces. It's not something that's replicated all over the place. You have it in gaming. You have like strong gaming communities and all that kind of stuff. And then DeFi is definitely one of those other ones. Who else would you like to see come on to a fireside chat?
Yeah, so if you haven't had him already, the legend that is the Polygon team for DeFi is Hamza. Really big fan of him. He's an amazing person to just see what he's cultivated so far within the DeFi space. And I've always enjoyed his fireside chats or AMAs or just times I get to have his ear on a call. The other person that I'd be very excited to see is the Balancer team. They just launched on Polygon now, so I'd be excited to hear, some of the highlights and the lowlights around that experience. Sushi would be the same on the same level, and then I think what would be really cool and something that aligns a bit more with QiDao is find the next big up and coming project on Polygon that's native to Polygon, who went all in and launched on Polygon, right? Like the UMA team or UMA protocol and many of the other protocols are coming to Polygon from Ethereum. So we were born in Ethereum, and we're going multi-chain, and that's all lovely and well. But I'd be interested in to know one of the cool new teams that are coming up in Polygon, and chose Polygon as the chain that they're going to launch on.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. In terms of Balancer, I think we've got one coming up in August with Fernando coming up. So we'll let you know about that. We'll send you the link. And yes, other Polygon projects. If you're listening, reach out to us. And I think we have a few also coming up that are Polygon native. But yeah, I really love chatting with you, Chandler. It was fantastic. I look forward to seeing what we come up with between UMA and QiDao. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure being here.
Awesome. Well, to the viewers, we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.